I would like to introduce Miss Autumn with Whole Story Meals.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Crystal, thank you so much for inviting me. This was absolutely amazing. I loved kayaking, and I got to see my alligators. Is this a bad time to let you know I have never spoken in front of a crowd before? Like, never. So good luck, everyone, and thanks for being my guinea pigs. The good news is Heather Anderson is chatting with us tomorrow evening, and she is super impressive.
Yes.
I love her. So as she said, I am Autumn Cullen, and I am a single mom of 5 amazing children, 4 boys and 1 daughter. I'm not really sure why I feel the need to mention that I'm a single mom of 5. Is it to make sure everyone knows and acknowledges what a badass I am taking care of all these children on my own? Or a call to the single men. Hello, I am right here waiting because doesn't every single man want a mom with 1 million kids? Okay, it's only 5, ladies. I'm a freaking catch. Okay, so I'm a mama with 5 children, and I hike and even backpack solo with my kids. And when I say hike, just picture us loaded down with bulky packs and walking so slowly, we are almost moving backwards. This isn't Heather Anderson hiking, ladies. Actually, I'm kind of the opposite of Anish. You know, she's hiked thousands and thousands of miles in a year and is National Geographic's Adventure of the Year. Our first backpacking trip was in flip-flops with a hike of about a quarter mile. Okay, fine. It was an eighth of a mile. But we had packs on our backs, and we hiked-ish in a single direction and set up tents and started a fire. Okay, so we didn't set up tents because I forgot the poles, but we did sleep outside. We were total pros. So, you know, Heather is National Geographic's Adventure of the Year for breaking records and stuff, and I'm here to bring balance. Shortest backpacking hike ever. I'm not really understanding why I haven't heard from National Geographic yet. Clearly, I'm impressive too. And with that intro, I know you're all dying to hear more about me. So basically, I lived outdoors as a kid. We didn't have a TV, so mostly I ran around barefoot and hung out in trees, on horseback, and read. And yes, I read while lounging in trees and on horseback. I was an outdoorsy nerd. We had this donkey, Cottontail. To say he had a personality would be an understatement. He would let us know exactly what he wanted in a not-so-subtle way. When he got tired of you lounging on his back, he would run straight for the chicken coop because it was low enough that as soon as he entered, he would smack against the top and be knocked clean off. Those were the good old days. It was glorious being outdoors so much. One of the things our family did was to take a trip to the Midwest. From the Midwest to Wyoming almost every year. We would go camping or pack the horses into Bighorn National Wilderness. Our horse packing trips were about 110 miles round trip and would take roughly 11 days. Even with the horses, we were still no match for Anish. But of course, I chose to blame Cottontail. He would just lay down whenever he got tired, pack and everything, and no amount of rousting could move him on down the trail. My dad taught me how to survive in the backcountry, how to set up a camp in a way that was consistent and always ready for a storm. In the mountains, storms can come on at any time. One of the most vivid memories and life lessons was the day we hobbled the horses and hiked up a mountain. It was the first week in July. It was a gorgeous, sunshiny day, and we were dressed in shorts and t-shirt, just leaving camp. Up the mountain, we found this secret valley that couldn't be seen from down below, and it was absolutely magical. But on the way down, we noticed the clouds rushing in from the east and from the west. there was definitely a storm coming. We hurried the best we could back to camp, but by the time we were down, the snow was falling and the wind was whipping around our shelter. As we were all snuggled up, I remember my dad saying this could potentially be a very serious situation. But we were prepared. My dad had planned for that storm. There seemed to be a foot of snow, and the wind actually blew down trees. This wasn't just a storm, but a blizzard. Even so, I felt safe. We were prepared. Learning to be prepared for the unexpected was a theme of my childhood, from freak blizzards to tagging along on the Boy Scout trips. Now, this was back when girls weren't part of Boy Scouts, but since I had short hair and a flat chest, no one seemed to notice. During these formative years, I learned a lot about the wilderness and taking care of yourself. Looking back, I am grateful for the lessons I learned and appreciate them. Unbeknownst to me, they had prepared me for my future life storms that seemed to come out of nowhere, and how nature can bring it all into focus. After college, I married a very charming man. He gave me gifts and sang me songs. I remember 2 months into our marriage telling this dashing man that instead of waiting 2 years to get married, to have babies, let's wait 3. And guess what? We found out we were pregnant the next week. That's how it goes, doesn't it? Yeah. And here began the morning sickness, the vomiting, and eventual health problems I struggled with for years. But we were young and decided since we were pregnant earlier than expected, we would just shift our timeline and have our baby sooner, so we could have time to travel after they were all out of the house. We would be young, empty nesters. Within 4 years, 1 baby had turned into 4, including a set of twins. Those were crazy, busy, insanely hard days. The workload and health issues pushing our marriage to the edge. With hard times, the cracks were growing in our marriage. But as the twins turned 3, life started to ease up a bit. And surprise, baby number 5 was on the way. And with 4 boys, we were all cheering for a girl. At the 20-week ultrasound, we found out our wish had come true. We were being blessed with a precious girl. I immediately started dreaming I would dress her in pink and have tea parties with giggling, twirling little girls in her home. I was so excited. As we were driving home from the appointment, I was looking at the ultrasound pictures. They had given us and noticed her size. No one had said anything, but she was measuring 11 days behind. The twins didn't even measure behind. I remember the exact place on the interstate when I felt that first twinge of concern. Was something wrong? Yes. Actually, there was something wrong. It was very, very wrong. I went in for an MRI, and the news was worse than I could have imagined. The doctor brought us into her tiny, messy office and broke the news. Story Grace would only develop to 2 to 3 months of age developmentally, and would most likely pass away at 1 to 2 years of age because of secondary illnesses such as pneumonia, diabetes, or the flu. My world stopped. In that moment, everything got very still. My baby girl was broken, and she needed her mama. I took out my pen and paper and started asking questions. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't fall to pieces. While I was with this doctor, I was going to gather as much information I could to figure out how to give my sweet girl the best life she could possibly have. I could fall apart later, but right now, my daughter needed me. Now, I had to be strong. Right now, I had to learn. There was work to do. This was a new kind of storm I hadn't yet faced, but I had to make sure we were prepared and hunkered down to make it through. Once Story Grace was born, she was diagnosed with chromosomal abnormalities, microcephaly, and brain malformations, amongst other things. She is now a tiny 6-year-old that doesn't walk, talk, or eat by mouth. She is legally blind and hard of hearing. She loves to laugh and dance, as we like to call it. I had no idea that you could experience so much pride, love, crushing pain, and joy all at once. I am so proud of Story Grace and her sweet little laugh, the joy she brings to our family. But then to see her miss out on so much. She's not having tea parties, or walking down the creek with her brothers, clinging to their hands, begging for them to help her catch crawdads like the other kiddos her age. Knowing Story Grace has made me a more compassionate, empathetic, grateful person. It's so easy to take the lives we lead for granted, but every day she reminds me to be grateful. Seeing my happy little Story Grace be an overcomer helps me see life differently. When she was born, I saw the world in black and white. Now I see it in rich, vibrant color. Having a severely disabled child changes you and your relationships. Not everyone can sit with you in your grief and pain. Needless to say, that first year with Story Grace was difficult. Not only was I homeschooling the 4 boys ages 8 and under, but Story Grace had holes in her heart, which caused her lungs to build up with fluid and her respirations to be high. So often I would just sit and watch her breathe, timing and counting every breath she took. When Story Grace turned 1, my husband and the father of our 5 children suddenly left. In the midst of the turmoil of learning each new diagnosis for our 11-pound 1-year-old and raising 4 energetic little boys, he was gone, and I was alone with 5 kids and the fear. I recently had a friend say to me, "Remember the time you called me and you were hiding in the closet, crying and afraid to come out?" She told me how helpless she felt and lamented that she was unable to be there as she was states away. Yeah, I remember that time. I'll never forget it. The grief, fear, and desperation in those days was so intense. There seemed no end to the snow burying me in its deluge. Now, I'm not a feminist. I've never felt the need to shout for my rights as a woman, but in those dark days, I was baffled and unprepared for the injustice of being a stay-at-home mom. I had sacrificed my career, my way to earn a living, to be self-sufficient so that I could stay home and love my family. I gave up my hometown and extended family that I dearly loved to move across the country for my husband's career. I grew rusty in my training and skills. My professional relationships waned and eventually disappeared completely after a decade of mom life. I might as well apply for an entry-level job. I felt that in choosing to stay home, I had unwittingly put my children at risk. No one cared that I was a political fundraiser and had met the President of the United States and organized special events. I believed, as I was told, that I was a failure at everything I did. I was completely alone, without a job or recent work history, and here I was with 5 kids in tow, standing in line at the food pantry. I was wondering what I was going to do and how I was going to get us through this. I remember being filled with anger and fear while rinsing the corn syrup off canned fruit that I needed for feeding Story Grace. I found hiking almost a year after my divorce. A friend invited me to go on a tiny hike. You can't even call it a hike, really. It was more like a walk around the park, but I felt fear. I didn't know if I was capable of this. The past decade had been spent taking care of babies and surviving. I had no confidence in my abilities to even do this simple walk, but I sucked it up and went. Looking back at my inner turmoil, I can see how defeated I was feeling. What happened that frosty New Year's morning changed the course of my life forever. On that one tiny hike around the park, my friend spoke of backpacking adventures, and I started to remember packing horses into the mountains. That was something I could do. I felt right at home in the backcountry. Of course, I'd never actually worn a pack on my back on any of these trips, but I thought mention that I used to think people were crazy for wearing packs on their backs. That's what horses are for. The peace from being outdoors was intoxicating and created in me a longing for more. The tiny hike rekindled my desire to get back to my roots, camping, packing, and savoring nature. Hiking did not just get me out having fun again, it built up my confidence and gave me courage to stand up for truth and stop believing the lies constantly being whispered in my ear. So I started planning my first trip. I talked a sweet friend into going with me on my first one. Why she trusted me to take her on this crazy adventure when, as an adult, I had never done anything like this, I have no idea. For that trip, we hefted our packs to our back, took a picture, and immediately set off on the wrong trail. But hey, we course corrected. That simple backpacking trip that I promised would only last 5 miles turned into 17. Thanks to some faulty advice from the worker at the state park and a few wrong turns on our part. But we had fun, and it was the beginning of something wonderful. Getting out in nature gave me hope that my children could have the life I'd been dreaming of for them, an active life in the outdoors, even though we live in town surrounded by plenty of screens. My boys are all rough and tumble. Being in the outdoors felt like an escape and a welcomed relief. They could be loud, jump, and run. I didn't have to worry about them breaking anything, and that was a first. So you may be wondering how I actually do this hiking and backpacking thing with 4 boys and a sweet story Grace to carry. Well, it's not pretty. When I started thinking about how to get us all out backpacking, my kids were ages 10 through 2, and they had basically no experience in the outdoors. So I started going on short hikes and doing a bit of car camping to get them used to sleeping outdoors, but still close enough to the car that we could bail at a moment's notice. I realized this could turn into an absolute nightmare with 1 adult, 4 boys, and a severely disabled little one. I remember my test hike before our first backpacking trip. I gave the boys all little backpacks and a few things to carry to get out on the trail. The boys seemed to be loving it, but one of my twins was starting to wear out close to our halfway point. When we were just 100 yards from this beautiful vista, Finian collapsed into a heap of tears and refused to go another step, reminding me a bit of Cottontail. I was more than a bit concerned as we still had to make it back to the car, and I was carrying Story Grace. I was not going to be able to help him. When suddenly I had an idea. Ice cream. I promised everyone ice cream once we got back to civilization, and with that he jumped up and practically ran the entire way back to the car. Kids. Clearly our test hike didn't go as I had hoped. If we were grading on a pass-fail, I would have failed. But I chose to ignore this minor detail and continued on with my backpacking plans. I'm not sure that was the smartest option, but I wasn't going to let one tiny little failed test run hold us back. In the beginning, my goal for my children was simply to expose them to the backcountry life and begin training them on how to set up and tear down camp. There's a lot to learn, from filtering water to stuffing a sleeping bag, and coming from one mama taking 5 kiddos, I needed them all to stuff their sleeping bags. On the trail, we talk of what to do in case of an emergency, how to care for our beloved outdoors, and how to persevere even when you're exhausted and want to give up. The boys each have their duties and camp chores just like at home, which makes it more doable, including taking care of Story Grace. We can't just leave her on her own. She won't stay sitting up, and we can't have her eating dirt, so someone is always with her. One of our most recent trips was so interesting. The boys were not super stoked about going this time. Some had more to say about it than others, but when they popped out onto the gorgeous view, they completely forgot all of their complaints. Honestly, it was shocking to see them go from "how much longer? Are we there yet?" to excitedly running around like Christmas morning. They wanted to show me everything. They just ran off the trail to start exploring, not even noticing the packs on their back. The mountains were calling them further. It was a beautiful sight to see, and I couldn't help but join them. Suddenly, it was all worth it. My pushing, cajoling, and bribing was paying off. My heart was full. You know what else makes all the hard parts of backpacking worth it? The conversations I have with my boys. It's easier for my boys to open up in the backcountry. The distractions disappear, and life is so simple. There's time to think and process. The trees keep our secrets. It was worth it. I'm glad I pushed through the hard parts and made it happen. Backpacking solo with 5 kids isn't easy, that's for sure. And backpacking with a severely disabled little girl is much more difficult. But we do it anyway. Every one of us deserves a chance to enjoy the beautiful outdoors. The great memories are worth all the hard work. When Story Grace was born, they said she would have feeding issues and may not be able to breastfeed. But, I had 4 boys within 4 years, including a set of twins, all of which I had successfully nursed. So I knew that I could breastfeed anything. I was basically a human heifer at this point. I was all like, hold my beer. I've got this. But I didn't have this. My tiny little babe couldn't eat by mouth. It's actually a complex movement to suck, swallow, and breathe. Who knew? I sure didn't. And who do you know that can't eat by mouth? What a shock to learn your child won't be able to survive without a device being placed into their stomach so food can be pumped into it, circumventing their mouth. Eating is so basic, so essential to life, and here I have a child that cannot eat. That was scary. But then, when you find out the experts want your fragile child to survive on a diet of 55% sugar, and when I say sugar, I mean maltodextrin, which is corn syrup. Enteral formula, which is the standard diet for 2-fed people, has 0 fruits, 0 vegetables, 0 whole grains, and yet that's what they want my most fragile child to consume every day, for every meal, for years on end. You would have to add sugar to Coca-Cola to equal the amount of sugar in the commercial enteral nutrition industry. Now, I'm no rocket scientist, but I do recall being taught that fruits and veggies are good and sugar is bad. Even the World Health Organization recommends a diet of less than 10% sugar, and it's even better if it's less than 5. Okay, so are you following me? They wanted me to feed my child that they had told me may only live a year or 2 and pass away from secondary illnesses such as pneumonia, the flu, or diabetes. One of the worst diets I'd ever heard of. How could this be? I asked our GI doc for help creating a healthy formula for my daughter, on which she promptly fired me. So here I am, refusing to feed my daughter crap, desperate for help, and her doc kicks us to the curb. Okay, fine, I'll do it myself. I've already fed 4 boys. I can feed this sweet girl anything better than a diet of 55% sugar with no actual food. Am I right, ladies? So I started making meals, blending them in a blender, and feeding them to Story Grace through her feeding tube. So at this point, I have conflicting priorities. Getting myself and the kids out, hiking more, or feeding Story Grace well. I had been blending Story Grace's food, but I couldn't carry a high-powered blender and refrigerate her meals in the backcountry. I really wanted to get out into the wilderness, just like I did as a kid. But I had to have a plan. A plan that would allow us to live without these boundaries, restricting us. But how? I started researching powdered meals to buy for her meals. But after reading a million labels, I realized there wasn't anything suitable for a legitimate meal replacement that contained whole foods and balanced macronutrients from quality sources. Y'all need to start reading your labels. I was pretty disappointed, but began to create my own powdered meal with real fruits and vegetables and whole grains to meet Story Grace's needs. I began to create my own solution. I needed a real food, lightweight, easy-to-use powder that could flow well through a feeding pump, which has an extremely small diameter. This was no easy task I was setting out to accomplish. I started researching and found that freeze-dried powders retain more than 96% of their nutritional value compared to dehydrated powders that only retain about 70. I chose freeze-dried meals to give Story Grace the best chance of eating nutritionally dense meals on the trail. Now, I'm no dietitian, but I did know that what I was doing was helping Story Grace thrive. Suddenly, I realized I had just created the first ever real food powdered meal for enteral nutrition. There were many other tube-fed people that could benefit from eating well and enjoying a better quality of life. This is how Whole Story Meals was born. Out of the struggle to feed Story Grace well and to live our best life possible came this gift that now other tube-fed people, like my daughter, can enjoy. Not only do I take it on the trail for Story Grace, but I consume it too. This healthy powder can also be consumed as a shake, an easy on-the-go meal. Thankfully, it's not just for tube-fed people. It's a great source of raw fruits and veggies, but it also can be high in calorie with plenty of protein and fat, which I need after a strenuous hike. I drink it practically every day for breakfast. It's mama fuel without the additives, preservatives, and sugar, plus a healthy dose of fruits and veggies. I've also had folks use it as a lightweight baby puree, both on and off the trail. I add it to pancakes, and our savory meal, I add to taco meat, like for real. I have big dreams for our Whole Story Meals, and I know we will get there with determination and a plan. Whole Story Meals was a game changer in our hiking and outdoor adventures, not to mention our daily lives full of appointments, gatherings, and activities. It took years to get this first product out there and ready for use. The medical field is full of unique hoops you have to go through to get any item on the market. Despite the bumps along the way, I can proudly say that Whole Story Meals has officially been in business for over a year, and we are growing. More people are hearing about us and are pushing prescribers to pay attention. We are also making headway in creating more meals for our community so they can have options. I went from being afraid of a simple hike around the park to backpacking solo with 5 kids. From wiping butts and taking names all day long to running a company. And from begging doctors to help me feed my child well to creating my own enteral nutrition, starting a company in the medical field that I have no training in, and having those same doctors prescribing my meals for their patients and insurance covering them. Now Whole Story Meals is the cutting edge of the enteral nutrition industry and changing the world of nutrition for those with feeding tubes. And to think, this all came from that first tiny little hike. The more life I experience, the more I realize the hard things in life are what make it beautiful. I have never been so broken in my life as when my husband walked out our door. I was shattered, but God picked up the pieces of my life, and with them, He has been creating the most stunning masterpiece. It's awe-inspiring that my God can create something so new, unique, and beautiful in me. My pain has transformed me and made me look inward and to God for my worth. I'm a better mom, friend, hiker because of life's unexpected storms. No one wants to hear pain is good. But the truth is, pain can be a powerful motivator. If we allow it, it will push us forward and in turn, produce good. It drives us to seek answers and make changes. When I think about it, I have noticed a few things. The pain of watching my daughter suffer on commercial formula motivated me to find a better option for her. The difficulties of having 4 boys confined to our little home in town pushed me to get us out hiking. The struggle to feed Story Grace well and get my family outdoors and living our best life motivated me to create a healthy powdered meal, giving my daughter health and my family freedom to live active lives. Stop waiting for happiness to find you. You can't find it by consuming. You create it by developing yourself, establishing a foundation of who you are, and for me, by building my relationship with God. You can experience this deep joy that even when you're grieving, even when you're afraid, and your world is falling apart, you can throw a little fit and stomp your feet, and beneath your feet, you feel something. That foundation you built. It's strong. You are strong because you prepared for life's storms. Maybe you learned the hard way and have had your life wrecked a few times. That's okay. I lost myself too. I let someone else tell me who I was, that I was a failure, that I was incapable, that I wasn't worthy. Now I know it feels wrong and seems unbelievable to tell yourself you can do something when you've heard for so long you can't. Your head wants to tell you that you're getting too big for your britches, but don't you listen. You're in charge, and you've decided you can do this. We all have our stories. We all have our brokenness, our disabilities, fears, and failures. Accept them. Accept that you have brokenness in your life. Tell yourself it's okay to be sad. Rest in your grief. Spend time mourning. And then slowly step out into the sunshine. Go on your New Year's morning hike. Push yourself a bit. Walk in the crisp air in silence. No music, no podcasts. Let your thoughts savor the earth around you and say thank you for this earth. Say thank you for being alive. You are happy you're alive? Say thank you anyway. I chose not to let the status quo limit Story Grace. I chose not to let the fact that no one else is backpacking alone with 5 children limit me. I chose not to let the fact that my youngest was tube fed, couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't see, and is hard of hearing limit our family. I refuse to listen to the naysayers out there. Thanks, Karen, but I've got this. What have you been telling yourself you can't do? What have you been allowing others to tell you you cannot do? Are you going to continue allowing it? Is it time to make a change? I've been in absolute awe of my life lately. It isn't an easy life, clearly, but it's good. These past few years have been insanely difficult, but I know I have so much good to look forward to. I know I have the world at my fingertips. My life is flourishing. I am so much stronger than I ever knew possible, and my joy runs deep. I am becoming the woman I always hoped to be. My dreams are coming true. I am peeling off the exterior, worn, shabby layers to reveal a rich, courageous woman of character. I am coming into myself. Some may say my aging external self is not as vibrant as before, but it doesn't matter. My soul is shining. We can be so caught up in surviving, we cannot imagine a better life. Sometimes it takes hard hits and rock bottom, a firm foundation from which to launch our true self. You have experienced pain. You have experienced fear. You have experienced grief. How does one pick up the pieces and move forward to become an overcomer? One step at a time, one hike at a time, and then one day, here you are, 5 years later, living your best life yet. Not the best life ever, because watch out, there is so much more in store for me and for you. Is it hard? Yes. Does it seem impossible? Most of the time. Do it anyway.